All right, guys and gals, as always, I am so happy that you're here on the World War Stuff YouTube channel. Thanks for checking it out. Still can't believe the response and in the relatively short time that we've been doing this. Just the engagement, the private messages that I've gotten of encouragement and people that are enjoying what we're doing, this sort of somewhat raw, unedited format, long format type of video on my collection of military surplus weapons. And if that interests you, I hope you'll stick around to see what's coming up on this episode. Yes, guys, that's right. If you are a noob or if you have your head buried in the sand, that's about the only way that you might not know what this guy is right here. The Enfield No. 4 Mark 1, the workhorse of the British Army during World War II. And there goes the No. 1 Mark 3. We'll get to that one. Yeah, so a couple of you guys wanted to see more of the guns themselves. I'm going to try to do a better job of that, just kind of getting into some close-ups and holding it up a little more. So, as a reminder, what we do on this channel, on the Milsurp chat episodes, we go piece by piece of the firearms, and I guess eventually maybe the other collectibles, swords, bayonets, uniforms, flags, that sort of stuff. But anyway, piece by piece, through the collection as far as the order in which I obtained these items. So next up on the list, the Enfield No. 4 Mark 1, the standard service rifle of the British Army during World War II. Now, I picked up this rifle from Collectors Firearms. You heard the mention of Collectors Firearms on the last episode of Spanish Mausers. And, a couple of you guys were a little bit down on collectors for various reasons, guys. Like, look, I get it. You got big box stores. They deal in high volumes of inventory. They have more or less experts on staff that deal in certain categories of firearms, to include Milsurp stuff. But with these big box stores, you're getting loads of advertising, you're getting loads of eyeballs on their content and their website, their gun broker page, all sorts of stuff. They're all over the place as far as their reach. And they get a lot of stuff in. And I was telling one guy in the comments, one trip that I went to Collectors Firearms, I saw a fully auto Type 96, transferable Type 96 Japanese machine gun. I saw a Colt 1911 that was owned by Pancho Villa, of all people. And what was the other one? Oh, a C93 Borchardt. So, guys, none of those exactly grow on trees, right? But to see them all on one trip and got to handle them, got to take photos of them. If you follow my Instagram, you probably saw photos of each of those. But guys, I love collectors, not so much for the price, but as I was saying in the last video on Spanish Mausers, you pay for the opportunity to have all of the cool stuff under one roof or under one website or, under one distributor, retailer, what have you. So I can get over that, and there are deals to be had, guys. If you browse these big sites, the Legacy Collectibles, and even some of the auction sites, the Rock Island, the Morphe, those types of places, you will find some deals here and there. It's not everything is overpriced. You just have to be on the lookout and be the first to snag whatever it is that you're looking for. So anyway, long story short, Enfield No. 4 Mark 1, I grabbed at Collectors Firearms in November of 2017. So again, still relatively early on in my collecting journey. I had gotten the M9130 Mosin Nagant that I butchered. Well, not butchered, I guess, but Bubba sanded the stock, all that. All these episodes you can check out down below. The M9130 that I destroyed, the Spanish Mauser, the M1911. What else did we do? The Romanian Tokarev. We did a Tokarev episode that was pretty cool. So yeah, again, all those are down below. But that's what brings us here to this point today. November of 2017, I picked up the Enfield No. 4 Mark 1. Now, I'm not a huge Enfield guy, admittedly. I've never been, not that I'm not a fan of them, they never really got me super excited, like some others do and did, that we will undoubtedly get to in this series. But at the time, I was browsing Collectors Firearms. I was in store, and they were running a sale for 20% off. I think it was Black Friday, yeah, November Black Friday sale. From time to time, Collectors Firearms will do a 20% off sale of literally everything in their inventory. From the cheapest thing to the most expensive thing, everything will be 20% off. So that's where I picked up this one, Black Friday of 2017. And so since I'm not the biggest Enfield guy in the world, you know, we're not going to go through a ton of history. You had the Lee Metford, the Long Lee, the SMLE, which I have on the table here as just a kind of reference point. But you had a long history of the development of this rifle, which I'm not super well versed in, so I'm not really going to even attempt it. But, you know, as far as the number 4 Mark 1, it was the primary service rifle of the British. And I guess this would be the right time to mention. The reason I picked out this particular rifle is because of this mark right here. The U.S. property. I thought that was cool. That caught my eye. You know, I could tell right off the bat this wasn't a U.S. service rifle, even in my limited knowledge of military surplus, but I knew this wasn't American. I might have known it was British. I don't quite recall, but when I saw the U.S. property, I thought that was really neat, and it drew me directly to it, and I thought, hey, that would be really cool to have, so I picked it up. Picked it up for $479, again, 20% off, so it was probably, you know, what, $540, $550 or so originally marked, which is a little bit high for back then, but again, big box store, you pay for the chance to see all this stuff, right? It's kind of like a museum walking into places like that, so yeah, it's going to be marked up. It is what it is. If you don't want to pay high prices, shop elsewhere. We talked a little bit about that in the last one. But anyway, so yeah, pick this one up at Black Friday for the 20% off sale. And the Savage, I guess would be a good time to mention the U.S. property marking. A Lend Lease gun, so the Lend Lease Act signed in mid-1941, essentially ending U.S. neutrality, I guess. Pre-war, so there had been a lot of, you know, back and forth between FDR and the citizens, and you know, poll after poll after poll of people who were such and such percentage for intervention and such percentage for isolationism. And as you got closer to Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, as you got closer to that instance, I think there was a pretty dramatic shift in those people who were more pro-intervention and less isolationist. And so that kind of goes along with the Lend Lease Act being signed in mid-1941. Basically, like I said, ending U.S. neutrality. You know, it's not like we declared war on anybody at that point, but, you know, we said, hey, we're going to supply weapons and munition, not money directly, but we're going to supply weapons to Allied forces, not Axis forces, right? So that's kind of, you know, tells you everything you need to know. And guys, doesn't that kind of remind you of something similar that's going on today or just recently, a couple years ago? Yeah, we're not a political channel, but has a lot of parallels, I guess you could say, to some more recent history. But anyway, so being a Lend-Lease gun, this obviously is produced in the United States, the United States at the Savage Stevens or Stevens Savage plant in Chicopee Falls. So I'll show you some interesting identifiers that identify it as a Chicopee Falls rifle here in a moment when we get a closer look. But the other North American made rifle being the Long Branch, made in Canada, obviously as another allied nation, no shocker there. So anyway, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and I'm going to try to bring you in for a closer look to some of the markings and identifying features on the Enfield No. 4 Mark 1 U.S. property marked Lend-Lease rifle. All right, y'all, so I'm doing the best I can with the setup I have, but hopefully this gives you a decent look at what we're about to see. So as far as Stevens Savage and the manufacture of the Enfield in World War II, they made a little over 1 million of them, from what I know. Other manufacturers made quite a few more. Obviously, the Royal Ordnance Factories at Maltby, and what was the other one? Fazakerley, and then Lithgow, Australia made them, and then we mentioned the Long Branch Canadian rifles. And then let's take a look at the serial numbers. So one of the first things I do when I get a new firearm is, everybody wants to know, how do I date this rifle? Like, not how do I take it out for drinks and a good night, but like, how do I find the date of manufacture from the serial number? And from what I gathered, there wasn't a direct, there's not like a chart or anything out there like some firearms that you can find. But from what I understand, these were numbered sequentially, with the numeral C coming as the third. So you'd have two numbers and then the letter C, which basically stood for Chicopee Falls, being a Chicopee Falls rifle under Savage Stevens. So this one, I believe, would be about late 1943, maybe early 1944, based on some other features. You have the number 4 Mark 1 Star. So I failed to mention previously, this is a number 1 Mark 4 Star, which is basically just a further simplification of the number 4 Mark 1. They deleted a few things, I'm not exactly sure, but you had a similar situation with the number 1 Mark 3s in World War I. When they came out with the number 1 Mark 3 Stars, they deleted the magazine cutoff, some rear sight parts, some other things, the volley sights. So I guess sort of a similar situation on this guy. And then, Britain really needed help producing these weapons after, the tragedy, or I guess the heroic actions. You could call it a tragedy or a heroic, circumstance, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it. At Dunkirk, basically, they lost all their small arms. Had to essentially start over with British small arms, more or less. That's a gross simplification, obviously, but... and then you had, Birmingham getting bombed in 1941 in the Battle of Britain. That was another huge blow. So they needed help making these rifles. And then along comes the Lend Lease Act to the rescue. And so Savage Stevens began making these rifles. Again, numbered sequentially. We talked about the date. Guys, what else on this? So as far as I understand, Savage only produced a certain number of features on this rifle. The receiver, the barrel, I believe, maybe the trigger guard assembly, if I'm not mistaken, and the stocks. So all the other little small bits, the safeties and the sights, barrel bands, all that sort of stuff, were outsourced to other contractors, which is pretty reminiscent of other companies and other weapons manufacturing during World War II. The first one that comes to mind is K98s with, certain manufacturers like Gustloff Work, the BCDs, BCD code K98s were, Gustloff was more or less an assembler of rifles, not a manufacturer of rifles. And then the other obvious one to me would be the M1 carbines, with just literally a dozen different contractors and subcontractors and various companies that would make different parts, and then certain companies would assemble everything and put everything together to make a finished rifle. Now on the Savage rifles, you're gonna see the boxed S more or less on every part, and I'm gonna throw in some pictures here just to highlight some of the various parts. I found one on the bolt head. We'll talk about bolt heads in a minute. The different numbered bolt heads. This one has a 2. Well, I guess let's just talk about it now. So as far as, head spacing these Enfields, it's not really recommended, not as big of a deal as head spacing, say a US rifle, Garand or 1903. And so people will say online, oh, you just need to change out the bolt head till you get the headspace right. But it's a lot more complicated than that, from what I've heard. And I'm not going to go into it because I'm not an expert and I don't want to steer you wrong. But it's a gross oversimplification to say you can just change out the bolt heads to alter the headspace on an Enfield number 4 Mark 1. So bolt heads could come from the factory with a 2 or a 1 or a 0. I believe, and then as the wear and tear got more and more, they would go up to a 3, and I don't remember, maybe they had a 4. I'm not 100% sure. But other features on this, you've got the flip sight with the micrometer adjustments, which is really, really nice for target shooting. And I mean, you can spin this thing and spin it all day long and just adjust it to your heart's desire. And then later ones, which this one is a later one, so I think the sight might have been changed out. Actually, I'm fairly certain of it, but this would be an earlier sight, and then they would go to just a simple flip sight, peep sight, with a short range and a long range aperture. Anyway, so talking about sights, these are interchangeable. If you find, if you have an L-shaped flip sight and you want a more fine-tuned adjustable target sight like this one, it is an easy swap from what I understand. I think it's just a screw there, and then if I go too much further into it, I'll get my pee-pee spanked by YouTube. So this channel already has a strike. I've only been at it for a month and a half, and I already have a strike, so not going to really go into all that. But the squared S should be all over this rifle. This I think is a bit of a mix master. It's got a well, first of all, it's got an unnumbered magazine, so you should see a serial number here on the magazine, which this one doesn't have. Not a big deal, still shoots fine. Really like this rifle a lot. It's got the 2-groove rifling. Other maybe earlier number 4s would have the 4, even the 5-groove rifling, which I had never heard of the 5-groove, but I hear that is a thing on these. And then going back to the serial number, earlier ones would have the date right here below the serial number. Or, maybe it was right here. Yeah, I think it was on the receiver. I'm sorry. So right under the rifle designation, the model designation, you would have the date. This one was not, so this would be a later one. The bolts on these guys are so smooth. In the cock on open, the cock on close, well, I'm gonna make myself a liar. The the bolt head tends to get out of the track on this one. So if I can get you in close, you see this little groove right here in the bottom rail of the receiver. Well, the bolt head is supposed to ride in that groove, so you line it up, flip it down, and close it. And that was clumsy as all get out, but we made it, guys. Huzzah. So anyway, bolt on these is super smooth. I tend to prefer the cock on open of the Mauser style action. I'm not sure why. Just personal preference. I really can't articulate a reason, but I will say the cock on close action of the Enfields, particularly these number 4s, is just so buttery smooth. Just can't beat it. So looking at an earlier one, the number 1 Mark III, this is the 1917 dated example that I just pulled off the wall on the rack behind me. If you haven't seen the World War I display video of the wall rack, be sure to check that out. It's a good video. So as you can see, a lot of cosmetic changes. You've got this big old nose cap at the front, this big old chunk and piece of metal that really does alter the balance of the rifle. So if I were to balance the rifle on my hand, actually the balance is more about right here. So a little forward of the magazine due to that big old chonkin piece of metal at the end of the rifle. On the number 4, it's actually a lot closer to the magazine, which is, more ideal for offhand shooting, I guess you would say. But going back to the number 1 Mark III, a lot of stuff was deleted and improved upon. First and foremost, I would say being the rear sight. You had this tangent adjustable sight for a rear sight, which they moved back to the rear, gave that adjustable peep sight. A lot of stuff is the same. The safety is in the same spot. The bolt throw is real similar. Still buttery smooth, but trying to think what else they changed on this. Obviously cosmetically it's much different. Let's talk about bayonets for a minute. So the pattern, I believe this is, pattern 1907. Little cheat code, if you can't remember the pattern or something, it might be on the actual thing itself. So pattern 1907 Wilkinson bayonet would fit right there on the nose cap of the #1 Mark III and just slide right on. So that's a really cool piece of kit right there. Really nice long 16-inch sword bayonet. And then obviously they would go to something much simpler on the #4, which would be the barrel-mounted spike bayonet, or the pig sticker. And I actually have not done this in years, so bear with me. Yeah, there's a button here. I'll just take this out. Oh, and this is a Savage Stevens bayonet as well. You can see, again, we were talking about the squared S. So the squared S is going to be all over these things. But let's see if I can mount this and not look like a fool. Yeah, there we go. So mount it, or through the grooves. You see the offset grooves there, which match up to the grooves on the barrel. Slide that in and turn, and it's on, and it's pretty cool. Pig sticker, relatively cheap. These are like 20 or 30 bucks, maybe even cheaper than that. So good stuff. Anyway, what else did I want to talk about? We talked about the ladder sights. Oh, the magazines, guys. 10 rounds, unbelievable on these, right? 10 rounds of 303 British hard-hitting rimmed case ammunition. Be careful of the rim lock. But man, what other rifle of the era, besides some of the automatics, obviously we're not going to get into that right now, but bolt action wise, can't do better than 10 rounds, right? And then you had, guys with the mad minute, they called it, when they would fire. Basically they'd empty the magazine as fast as they could, and reports from German troops said that they thought they were being fired on by machine guns at certain points, when it was actually just British troops who were good working the bolt. I mean, that bolt has a super smooth throw, really, really nice. So that does not surprise me at all. And then I guess we'll just end with, common markings that you might see on these. The England, this would be an export. So when they would finally surplus these onto the surplus market, you'd find export markings that say England. And then if I can get this bayonet off, which may be a chore. There we go. See, I'm smarter than I thought I was. On all British small arms, you will have the Birmingham nitro proof right there. So they would have to proof test all these weapons before they surplus them onto the commercial market. So that marking will be somewhere on a surplused British rifle, unless it's a bringback. If you find a lack of, the word England and a lack of something that looks like that, the BNP, and then a number, and it'll say tons, so tons per square inch of pressure on whatever, method of testing the loads or whatever. If you find a lack of those markings, you might be looking at a bringback rifle. Other than that, I don't really have too much else. It's a nice rifle. I believe I have 3 Enfields now, but this one was my first. Really nice blonde. I think this is a Beechwood stock. It's been cleaned up and sanded. It's not original finish or anything like that. But it's a looker. It displays well, and it's really nice looking. So really happy to have it, and really glad you guys checked out the video. So stay tuned for the next one. I'm going to have to look at my spreadsheet and find out, but I think it's something pretty exciting, like maybe one of my favorite rifles of all time. So can't wait for that. If it's not, that one's coming up soon. But anyway, I've gone on long enough. I hope you'll stick around for the next one. And if you enjoy this type of stuff, feel free to do all the Facebook crap, the likes, the comments, subscriptions, turn on the notifications. I try not to whore out for likes and subscriptions like I always say, but it does help out realistically. So anyway, with all that said, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy. Bye.